The email landed at 7:47 a.m. on a Monday. 3 words in the subject line that made Tony Reeves's coffee taste like battery acid. Urgent, design review. He sat in his cramped office at Morrison and Blake Structural Engineering, 3rd floor of a converted warehouse in downtown Portland, Oregon. Rain streaked the windows. It always rained in Portland. The locals said you got used to it. Tony had lived here 11 years and still hadn't. He clicked the email. Mr. Reeves, preliminary stress analysis on the Granville Bridge retrofit indicates potential anomalies in the cantilever support calculations. Please report to conference room B at 9 a.m. for immediate review. Richard Hayes, senior partner. Tony read it twice. Then a third time. The Granville Bridge, his bridge. The biggest project of his career. A 1940s steel truss span that connected 2 halves of a city, and he'd spent 18 months designing its rehabilitation. Every bolt, every weld, every load-bearing beam, and now someone was telling him his math might be wrong. His hands were shaking, actually shaking. He looked at them like they belonged to a stranger. See, here's the thing about structural engineering that most people don't understand. It's not like other jobs. You screw up a marketing campaign, someone loses money. You screw up a legal brief, someone loses a case. You screw up a bridge, people die. Tony had nightmares about it sometimes. The Hyatt Regency walkway collapse in Kansas City, 1981. 114 people. A connection detail that looked fine on paper. The I-35W Mississippi River Bridge in Minneapolis, 2007. 13 dead because of undersized gusset plates. Every engineer knew these stories. They were whispered like ghost tales in graduate school. Warnings, reminders, your work has weight. Literally. He pushed back from his desk and walked to the window. Across the street, a woman was walking a golden retriever. A FedEx truck double-parked. Normal Monday morning stuff. None of them knew that somewhere in this building, a man was sweating through his shirt because of load calculations. You look like someone just canceled Christmas. Tony turned. Sarah Park stood in his doorway, holding 2 cups from the break room. She was 34, Korean-American, with a sharp jawline and sharper wit. They'd worked together for 6 years now. She was the only person in this office he actually liked. Got the Hayes email? He asked. Everyone got the Hayes email. She handed him a cup. Decaf, you look like you need to not have a heart attack right now. It's my bridge, Sarah. I know. If there's a flaw in my calculations, then we'll find it and fix it. That's literally what the review is for. She sipped her coffee. Besides, Hayes sends these dramatic emails every quarter. Remember the Peterson overpass thing? Turned out to be a decimal point in the wrong column. Took 20 minutes to sort out. Tony wanted to believe her. He really did. Hey, Sarah snapped her fingers. Earth to Tony, when's your anniversary again? Saturday. What? Your anniversary with Cheryl, 7 years, right? The big one? He blinked. God, yes, Saturday. He'd bought the gift 3 weeks ago, a vintage Polaroid camera because she'd been obsessed with film photography lately. It was wrapped and hidden in his sock drawer like some kind of contraband. Yeah, he said. 7 years. You got something nice planned? Dinner at Canard, that French place on Division Street she's been wanting to try. Sarah whistled. Fancy, she's a lucky woman. I'm the lucky one, Tony said, and he meant it, because here's the thing about Cheryl, she was the best accident that ever happened to him. 7 years ago, different city, different life. Reed College, Southeast Portland, October. The leaves were doing that thing where they turned gold and red and made everything look like a postcard. Tony was 24, finishing his master's thesis on seismic retrofitting techniques, and he was late for a meeting with his advisor. He was cutting across the quad at a half-jog when he heard the scream. Not a scared scream, more like an oh crap scream. He turned just in time to see a bicycle careening toward him. The rider, a girl with wild auburn hair and a vintage denim jacket, was squeezing both brakes, her face a mask of pure panic. The bike's front tire hit a crack in the pavement. The bike stopped. The girl didn't. She launched over the handlebars like a missile and slammed directly into Tony's chest. They both went down in a tangle of limbs and backpack straps and scattered papers. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Ow, she said finally, her face approximately 3 inches from his. Yeah, Tony agreed. Ow, she had green eyes. That was the first thing he noticed. Green like sea glass, green like the light through a wine bottle. I'm so sorry, she said, scrambling off him. The brakes, I told my roommate the brakes were shot. Are you okay? Please tell me I didn't break you. Tony sat up. His elbow was scraped and his thesis notes were scattered across the grass like oversized confetti, but everything important seemed intact. "I'll live," he said. "You." She did a quick inventory. Knees skinned, palms raw, pride demolished. "I've had better Tuesdays," he laughed. He couldn't help it. She laughed too, and something clicked, something invisible and electric and completely inexplicable. "I'm Cheryl," she said, sticking out her hand, then wincing and retracting it. "Actually, don't shake that. It's basically a crime scene. Tony, and I appreciate the warning." He helped her gather her things. She was a theater major, junior year, auditioning for the fall production of Chekhov. She talked fast and gestured constantly, like her hands were trying to keep up with her brain. He asked her to coffee. She said yes. She said yes so fast it surprised them both. They went to a place called Fresh Cup on Hawthorne, ordered drinks, talked for 4 hours. Missed his advisor meeting entirely. By the end of the night, he knew 3 things. 1, she was the funniest person he'd ever met. 2, she had a way of looking at him that made him feel seen in a way he couldn't explain. 3, she had a secret. She told him on their 3rd date. They were sitting in her tiny apartment, eating Thai takeout from paper containers, and she got quiet. Serious. The kind of serious that made Tony's stomach clench. "There's something I need to tell you," she said, "before this goes any further." "Okay." "I have a medical condition. It's called breast hypoplasia. Basically, my breasts never really developed. I'm almost completely flat." Tony waited. She wasn't looking at him. "There's more," she said. "Because of some hormonal thing, my nipples are hypersensitive, like really hypersensitive. It can be painful or overwhelming. It makes certain things complicated." She finally looked up. Her eyes were wet. "I've had guys bail on me before," she said, "when they found out, so if you're going to bail, I'd rather you do it now than—" "I'm not going to bail." "You don't know that. Cheryl." He put down his chopsticks, took her hand. "I like you, not your measurements." She laughed, a wet, choked sound. "That's the corniest thing anyone's ever said to me. I'm an engineer. We're not known for our poetry." She kissed him then, right there, surrounded by half-eaten pad thai and fortune cookies and the general mess of her studio apartment. And Tony knew with the certainty of a perfectly balanced equation that this was it. This was the foundation, present day. Monday afternoon, the meeting with Hayes was brutal but brief. The anomaly turned out to be a flagged item from a junior analyst who didn't understand cantilever dynamics. The calculations were fine. The bridge was fine. Everything was fine. But Tony couldn't shake the cold feeling in his chest. He drove home through rush-hour traffic, wipers slapping against the rain, listening to the same Simon and Garfunkel album he'd been playing since college. Bridge Over Troubled Water came on, and he laughed darkly at the irony. Their house was a 1920s craftsman bungalow in the Selwood neighborhood, south of downtown. White trim, green door, a porch swing that neither of them ever used. They'd bought it 5 years ago with a combination of Tony's savings and a small inheritance from Cheryl's grandmother. Home. He parked in the driveway and sat there for a moment, decompressing. Deep breaths. "You're fine. The bridge is fine. Everything is fine." He walked through the front door and found Cheryl standing in the middle of the living room holding a bottle of champagne. "Guess what?" she screamed. Tony nearly dropped his briefcase. "Jesus, what?" "I got it." "Got what?" "The part. Tony, I got the part." She was bouncing, actually bouncing, like a kid who'd just been told Christmas came early. Her auburn hair was wild around her face and her green eyes were shining. "What part?" Tony asked, genuinely confused. "The Playhouse, the production I auditioned for last month. The Lover, I'm playing the French girl." It took a moment for the words to arrange themselves into meaning. The Playhouse, that was the Riverside Community Theater, a renovated warehouse on the East Side. She'd been auditioning there for years, getting small roles, chorus parts, unnamed woman 3. "Cheryl, that's amazing." He dropped his briefcase and hugged her, lifting her off the ground. "That's the lead, right? The actual lead?" "Yes, well, one of the leads. It's an ensemble piece. But I have the most stage time of any female character, and there's this whole arc." She talked for 20 minutes straight. The play, the script, the rehearsal schedule, the director's vision. Tony listened, nodding, asking questions at the right moments. He was genuinely happy for her. This was her dream, had been since before he knew her. "Oh, and get this," she said, finally pausing to breathe. "Jimmy Chung is playing the male lead." "Who's Jimmy Chung?" Only the biggest donor to the arts community in this city. He owns like half the car dealerships in Oregon, and he's actually a really good actor. Did some theater in college before he went into business. She said his name with a certain reverence. Tony filed it away but didn't think much of it. That night they made love for the first time in 3 weeks. Work had been crushing him, and she'd been stressed about auditions, and somewhere along the line they'd fallen into that married couple rhythm where sleep became more precious than sex. But not tonight. Tonight she was fire in his arms. Afterward she curled against him, her head on his chest. "This is it, Tony," she whispered. "I can feel it. This is my big break. I believe you. Jimmy says they're bringing in actual Hollywood scouts for the showcase. This could be my ticket." Jimmy says, 2 words, completely innocuous. Tony barely registered them. He fell asleep with his wife in his arms and the rain drumming on the roof and the sweet, familiar certainty that his life was solid. A foundation, a bridge. He had no idea that both were about to collapse. The Riverside Community Theater looked like it had been designed by someone who couldn't decide between industrial chic and haunted warehouse. Exposed brick walls, rusted iron beams, vintage theatrical posters in cracked frames. The whole place smelled like sawdust and old velvet and the particular mustiness of a building that had seen better decades. Tony stood near the entrance, holding a plastic cup of room-temperature wine, feeling profoundly out of place. It was Thursday night, the meet and greet mixer for the cast and crew of The Lover. Cheryl had begged him to come. "It's important," she'd said that morning, laying out 3 different outfit options on their bed. "These are my people now, my creative family. I need you to be part of it." So here he was, surrounded by her creative family. They were. A lot. Every conversation seemed to be happening at maximum volume. People kept hugging each other like they hadn't seen each other in years when Tony was pretty sure they'd just been at rehearsal together yesterday. Someone in the corner was doing vocal warm-ups. Someone else was interpretively dancing to what sounded like Finnish death metal. Normal people, Tony thought. Just normal people who happened to be completely insane. "You must be Tony." He turned to find a short, balding man in a rumpled blazer rushing toward him. The man's face was flushed, his tie was crooked, and he looked like he'd aged 40 years in the last week. "Gary Blumenthal." The man pumped Tony's hand. "I manage this asylum. Cheryl has told us so much about you. Good things, I hope." "The best. She said you're some kind of engineer?" "Structural." "Bridges, mostly." Gary's eyes lit up. "Oh, fantastic. Maybe you can take a look at the catwalk sometime. They've been making this creaking sound that I'm sure is nothing, but insurance says we need an assessment and—" "Gary," a woman's voice cut through the crowd. "Gary, the ice sculpture is melting. We don't have an ice sculpture." "Exactly. Someone was supposed to order one." Gary gave Tony an apologetic look and scurried off into the chaos. Tony stood alone again, sipping his wine, watching. He spotted Cheryl across the room, surrounded by admirers. She was wearing a green dress he didn't recognize, must have bought it for tonight, and she was glowing. That was the only word for it, glowing. A woman approached her. Mid-50s, elegant, with silver hair swept up in a complicated twist. She was smiling, but the smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Tony edged closer, eavesdropping shamelessly. "So wonderful to have fresh blood," the woman was saying. "The company has needed new energy. I'm Alina Vasquez. My husband Mark is playing the Chinese man." "Oh, I've heard so much about Mark," Cheryl gushed. "Everyone says he's incredible. He's been doing this for 30 years. Alina's smile tightened. "I used to perform as well, you know, before. She gestured vaguely at herself, and Tony understood. The weight of age, the slow fade from leading lady to character actress to whatever came after that. "I'm sure you were wonderful," Cheryl said, and Alina's smile went even tighter. "Enjoy it while it lasts, dear. The spotlight has a short memory." She drifted away, and Cheryl's glow dimmed for just a moment before reigniting. Tony made his way toward her, stopping only when a firm hand caught his shoulder. "You must be the husband." The voice was deep and warm, like whiskey poured over gravel. Tony turned to find a man about his age, mid-30s, salt and pepper hair, kind eyes with crinkles at the corners. He was holding a beer and wearing a worn leather jacket that somehow looked more expensive than everything Tony owned combined. "Mark Vasquez," the man said. "I play opposite your wife. Tony Reeves. I design bridges and try not to embarrass myself at parties." Mark laughed. "A man of modest ambition. I respect that." He clinked his beer against Tony's wine cup. Your wife is talented, really talented. This isn't the usual community theater smoke blowing. She's got something. Thanks, she works hard. She does. I've been watching her in rehearsals. Mark's expression shifted. Something darker there, something careful. I've also been watching other things. Other things? Before Mark could answer, the room's energy changed. A hush rippled outward from the entrance, and Tony felt the collective attention shift. Jimmy Chung had arrived. He entered like a man who expected applause, 50-something but fighting it with expensive suits and aggressive skincare. Hair perfectly silver at the temples, teeth that were definitely not the ones God gave him. He was handsome in that specific way that wealthy men often were, not naturally attractive but enhanced, upgraded. My friends, Jimmy spread his arms wide. My family, my ARTISTS. The room erupted. People swarmed him. Hands reached out to touch his shoulders, his arms, like he was some kind of celebrity messiah. Tony watched from the margins, fascinated and faintly repulsed. Jimmy worked the room with practiced ease. A compliment here, a shoulder squeeze there. He remembered everyone's name, asked about their kids, their projects, their dreams, and then he saw Cheryl. His whole face changed. It was subtle. Tony might not have noticed if he hadn't been watching closely, but the smile went from professional to something else, something hungry. Cheryl. Jimmy crossed the room in long strides and took both her hands in his. My French girl, my star. He leaned in and kissed her on both cheeks. European style, except it wasn't quite European style, was it? It was too close, too lingering. His lips brushed the corner of her mouth. Tony's wine turned to acid in his stomach. Jimmy, this is my husband, Cheryl said, stepping back slightly. Tony. Tony, this is Jimmy Chung. Jimmy turned his spotlight smile on Tony and extended his hand. The structural engineer, Cheryl talks about you constantly. My Tony this, my Tony that. You're a lucky man, friend. So I keep hearing. Jimmy's handshake was firm, too firm, the kind of handshake that was trying to say something. Tony didn't know what. You're going to love what we're creating here, Jimmy said. This isn't just a play, it's a statement, an experience. We're bringing Hollywood-level production values to community theater. Sounds ambitious. I don't do anything small. Jimmy laughed at his own non-joke. We've got scouts coming from 3 major agencies, real industry people. This showcase is going to put Riverside on the map. He said showcase like it was a magic word, like it could open doors that had been locked Cheryl's whole life. Tony looked at his wife. She was hanging on Jimmy's every word, her face flushed, her eyes bright. He'd seen that look before, in college, when she talked about her dreams. He didn't like seeing it directed at someone else. Excuse me, Tony said. I need more wine. He didn't get more wine. He found the copy of the script that someone had left on a folding table and started reading. The Lover was a play about obsession, about a wealthy older man and a young French woman meeting in a rented room in colonial Vietnam. It was sensual, explicit, the kind of material that pushed boundaries. Cheryl's character was 15 in the original text. The adaptation had aged her to 18, for legal reasons, according to a note in the margins, but the dynamic remained. Youth and age, innocence and experience, power and submission. There was a scene where the Chinese man, Jimmy's role, bathed the French girl, Cheryl's role, described in loving detail. The water, the soap. The slow discovery of her body. Tony closed the script. His hands were shaking again. Heavy reading. Mark had materialized beside him, another beer in hand. I didn't realize the material was so, Tony searched for the right word, intense. It's Marguerite Duras. She didn't write Hallmark cards. Mark leaned against the wall. Listen. I'm going to tell you something because you seem like a decent guy and your wife seems like a nice woman. Okay. Jimmy Chung is a checkbook artist. He funds productions to give himself starring roles. The Hollywood scouts he keeps mentioning, one is his cousin who works in catering for Paramount. The other is a guy he met at a fundraiser who knows people. Tony absorbed this. So the showcase is a vanity project, an expensive one. Jimmy made a significant donation to the theater, significant enough that the board gave him complete creative control. Why are you telling me this? Mark took a long pull from his beer. Because I've seen this before, wealthy guys who fancy themselves artists. They come into community theaters, throw money around, and he trailed off. Just keep an eye on your wife, that's all I'm saying. He walked away before Tony could ask any follow-up questions. The drive home was quiet. Cheryl was buzzing with excitement, chattering about the production, the costumes, the vision. Tony made appropriate noises, but his mind was elsewhere. That night, while Cheryl took a shower, he sat on the edge of their bed and thought about bridges. A bridge is only as strong as its weakest point. You can have perfect steel and flawless welds, but if one connection fails, the whole structure comes down. He wasn't sure why that thought felt so relevant, but it did. 2 weeks into rehearsals, and Tony was starting to lose track of his wife. Not physically, she was still there, still sleeping beside him most nights, still sitting across from him at the breakfast table, still kissing him goodbye when he left for work. But there was something different, something distant. Like she was present in body, but her mind was already on stage, running through lines, inhabiting someone else's skin. "It's called method acting," she explained one morning, not looking up from her script. "You don't just perform the character, you become her, you live in her space. Even at breakfast, especially at breakfast, the mundane moments are where the truth lives." Tony poured himself more coffee and decided not to ask what that meant. Work wasn't going great either. The bridge project had entered its most critical phase. Final stress calculations, material orders, coordination with a dozen different contractors. Tony was juggling 100 details, and lately some of them were slipping through his fingers. Tuesday afternoon. Sarah found him staring at his computer screen, the same spreadsheet open for 40 minutes. "Hey," she knocked on his doorframe. "You okay? Define okay." She stepped inside and closed the door behind her, never a good sign. "I caught your error," she said quietly. "The load distribution table you submitted yesterday, you mixed up 2 column values." Tony's blood went cold. "How bad?" "Not catastrophic. I fixed it before it went a haze." She sat in the chair across from him. "But Tony, this isn't like you. You're the most detail-oriented person I know. What's going on?" He wanted to tell her, he really did. But what would he say? "My wife is acting weird because she's pretending to be a French teenager from the 1920s. Some rich guy at her theater makes me uncomfortable for reasons I can't articulate." "Just stress," he said. "I'll get it together." "You better." Her voice was kind but firm. "This bridge is important. People are counting on it." "I know. Do you, though?" She leaned forward. "Look, I don't know what's happening at home, that's your business, but I've seen this before, good engineers who let personal stuff leak into their professional life. It never ends well." "I said I'll handle it." "Good," she stood. "Handle it fast." Thursday evening. Tony left work early for once, hoping to surprise Cheryl with dinner. He stopped at Nostrana, her favorite Italian place, and picked up 2 orders of their famous rigatoni with pork sugo. He was driving home, food warm on the passenger seat, when he passed Luigi's Pizza on Hawthorne. Through the window, he saw them, Cheryl and Jimmy, sitting in a booth, holding hands across the table. Tony slammed on the brakes. The car behind him honked furiously. He pulled into a parking space, hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel, and watched. Jimmy was talking. Cheryl was listening, her head tilted, her expression rapt. Their hands were intertwined, not just touching, but intertwined, his thumb stroking the back of her hand. For a long moment, Tony couldn't move. Then he was out of the car, across the street, pushing through the restaurant door. "Tony," Cheryl's face registered surprise, maybe guilt, maybe something else entirely. "What are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing. We're rehearsing, it's a scene we're working on." "The holding hand scene in a pizza parlor?" Jimmy smiled. That smooth, practiced smile that Tony was really starting to hate. "Method acting," Jimmy said. "We're building the relationship offstage so it feels authentic on stage. It's a technique Stanislavski pioneered. I know what method acting is." "Then you understand." Jimmy released Cheryl's hand and leaned back, arms spread wide. "No reason for alarm, friend, just 2 artists doing their work." Tony looked at his wife. She was avoiding his eyes. "The food's getting cold," he said finally. "I'll see you at home." He walked out. He didn't look back. They fought that night, not a big, screaming fight. Worse, a cold, controlled fight, words delivered like surgical incisions. "You don't understand what this process requires," Cheryl said. "Jimmy is a visionary. He's pushing me to places I've never gone as an artist." "I bet he is." "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. It obviously means something, Tony." He stood at the window, looking out at the dark street. "Mark told me about Jimmy, about his showcases, about the scouts who aren't really scouts." Silence. "Mark is jealous," Cheryl said finally. "He's been doing community theater for 30 years and gone nowhere. Of course he resents someone like Jimmy who actually has connections. So there are real scouts coming. Jimmy says, Jimmy says, Jimmy says, that's all I hear anymore, Cheryl. Jimmy says this, Jimmy says that. He's my director. Is that all he is? The question hung in the air between them. Cheryl's face went through several expressions. Anger, hurt, something that might have been fear. I can't believe you would ask me that. I can't believe you would give me a reason to. More silence, the kind that felt like a wall. I need to sleep in the guest room tonight, Cheryl said finally. What? Why? The French girl is lonely, isolated. I need to embody that isolation to bring authenticity to the performance. Tony stared at her. You're kidding. I'm not. You're telling me you're going to sleep in a different room than your husband because of a character. You don't understand. Her voice was cold. You've never understood what it takes to really commit to art. She grabbed her pillow and walked out. Tony stood alone in their bedroom, and listened to the guest room door close. He sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. Eventually, he reached for his phone and pulled up his music app. Simon and Garfunkel, I Am a Rock. The song started. Paul Simon's voice, gentle and bitter all at once. A winter's day in a deep and dark December. Tony lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. I am a rock, I am an island. He could hear something through the wall, faint, distant, the sound of crying. He got up, walked to the guest room door, raised his hand to knock, and then didn't, because what would he say? What words could bridge this gap that had opened up between them? He went back to bed, alone. The song played on, and a rock feels no pain, and an island never cries. 3 weeks in, and they were living as strangers, not hostile strangers, polite ones, which was somehow worse. Good morning. Good morning. Coffee? No, thanks. Have a good day. You too. Like roommates who didn't particularly like each other, but had signed a lease they couldn't break. Cheryl slept in the guest room every night now. She came and went at odd hours, rehearsals, costume fittings. Character work sessions that she never explained. Tony threw himself into the bridge project. It was easier than thinking about anything else. The stress calculations were solid now. The material orders were finalized. Everything was on track. Richard Hayes had even sent him a complimentary email, a rare event that Sarah described as basically a parade in your honor. His professional life was a fortress. His personal life was a ruin. Saturday morning, Tony came downstairs to find Cheryl emerging from the bathroom, wrapped in a towel. She startled when she saw him. Oh, I thought you'd left already. Working from home today. Right. She moved past him toward the stairs, but something made Tony look twice. Something different about the way she was moving, the way she was holding the towel. Cheryl, she stopped. Let me see. See what? Whatever you're hiding. For a moment he thought she would refuse, but then her shoulders sagged and she let the towel drop slightly. She was shaved completely. Not just trimmed, shaved smooth. Tony felt his stomach drop. It's for the bath scene, she said quickly. The director, Jimmy, said the character would be it's a period-appropriate choice. The bath scene. Yes, the one where Jimmy bathes you naked. It's art, Tony. That scene isn't in the script, she blinked. What? I read the script, Cheryl, cover to cover. There's no bath scene. A flush crept up her neck. It's been added. Jimmy felt the piece needed more context, more intimacy. It helps establish the power dynamic between the characters. I bet it does. Don't do that. Do what? Make everything sound dirty. Make it sound like there's something going on. There's nothing going on. It's just a scene. Just a scene where you get naked with another man and let him wash you. In character, in front of an audience. An audience that includes Hollywood scouts, right? That's what Jimmy says. She grabbed her towel and pulled it tight around herself. I don't have to explain myself to you. You don't understand what I'm doing. You've never understood. She stormed upstairs. Tony stood in the hallway, staring at the closed bathroom door. That afternoon, while Cheryl was at rehearsal, Tony did something he'd never done before. He went through her things. He wasn't proud of it. Actually, he felt sick the whole time, but something was wrong. He could feel it in his bones, and he needed to know. Her desk was the obvious starting point. Papers, scripts. Highlighted pages covered in notes. Nothing unusual. Her dresser, clothes, jewelry, a drawer of mementos from their years together, her closet, costumes, shoes, a box of old photographs. Nothing. He was about to give up when he noticed the suitcase in the back of the closet. The one she'd taken to that conference in San Francisco last year. It was slightly unzipped. He pulled it out, opened it. Inside, buried under a pile of old scarves, was a notebook. Black cover, cheap spiral binding. The kind of thing you'd buy at a drugstore. On the front, in Cheryl's handwriting, was a single word, rehearsal. Tony opened it. The first few pages were normal enough, character notes, blocking diagrams, line interpretations, but then he reached the dated entries. September 15th. Jimmy told me today that Tony doesn't understand my fire. He said some people are born to support and some are born to shine. He said Tony is a wonderful man, but he'll never understand what it means to truly create. I think he might be right. Tony's hands were shaking. September 18th. Worked late with Jimmy on the boarding house scene. He showed me how to move my body to suggest vulnerability. His hands on my waist, teaching me. When I came home, Tony was already asleep. I watched him for a long time. He looked so peaceful, so content. I felt like I was looking at a stranger. September 22nd. Jimmy says the French girl is a woman awakening to her own desire. He says I need to access that desire in my real life to bring it to the stage. He touched my face today when he said it. I didn't pull away. There were more entries, pages and pages. Tony couldn't read them all. The words were blurring together, turning into a kind of static in his brain. He photographed every page with his phone. Then he put the diary back exactly where he'd found it. He sat on the floor of the closet for a long time, staring at nothing. That night he called Mark. "I need to talk to someone," Tony said. "Someone who understands what's going on over there." Mark named a bar, Shipwreck Lounge on Division Street, 30 minutes. Tony was there in 20. The place was exactly what you'd expect from the name, dark wood, nautical kitsch, a bartender with a beard you could lose small animals in. Mark was already seated in a back booth, nursing what looked like his third beer. "You read the diary," Mark said, not a question. "How did you know about the diary?" "I didn't, but you have that look." The look of a man who just found out something he didn't want to know. Tony slid into the booth, ordered whiskey, drank half of it before speaking. "Tell me about Jimmy Chung, tell me everything," Mark sighed. "I've been doing this a long time, Tony, 32 years. I've seen guys like Jimmy come and go. They're always the same, rich men who want to feel like artists. They fund productions. They give themselves leading roles. They surround themselves with young, talented, vulnerable people. Vulnerable how? Actresses, dancers, artists who are desperate for a break, who will believe anything if you tell them you can make their dreams come true." Tony thought about Cheryl, her years of auditions, her small roles, her endless, burning hope. "The showcase," Tony said. "It's fake, isn't it?" "Not entirely. There will be people there, industry-adjacent people, enough to give the whole thing a veneer of legitimacy, but real scouts, actual agents looking for talent." Mark shook his head. "Jimmy's been doing these showcases for years. None of his leading ladies have ever gotten so much as a callback." "Then why do it?" Mark looked at him with something like pity. "Because the show isn't the point. The show is just the excuse." "The excuse for what?" But Tony already knew. He'd known since the moment he saw them holding hands in the pizza parlor. He'd known since the bath scene that wasn't in the script. He'd known since the shaving. He just hadn't wanted to admit it. "I have a contact," Mark said. "A guy who works at one of Jimmy's dealerships. He knows things about Jimmy's hobbies." "Hobbies? Let me make a call, then we'll talk." Mark left to use the phone outside. Tony sat alone, staring at his whiskey. The line between method and reality blurs on the page. That's what he'd thought when he read the diary. And now he understood exactly what it meant. His wife wasn't just playing a woman who fell for an older, powerful man. She was becoming her. The question was, what was he going to do about it? Mark came back 15 minutes later. "My guy will meet with you tomorrow. He's got something he thinks you need to see." "What kind of something?" "The kind that answers all your questions." Mark finished his beer. "But Tony, be sure you want those answers, because once you know the truth, you can't unknow it." Tony thought about the diary entries, the bathroom, the guest room, the growing distance. "I need to know," he said. "Whatever it is, I need to know." Mark nodded slowly. "Then I'll text you the details." He paid his tab and left. Tony sat alone in the dark bar, the whiskey warming his stomach but doing nothing for the cold that had settled somewhere deeper. Outside, it started to rain again. It always rained in Portland. The house sat at the end of Palatine Hill Road, up where Portland's old money lived behind wrought iron gates and manicured hedges. 3 stories of modern architecture, all glass and steel and sharp angles. The kind of house that screamed, "I have more money than taste, and I'm fine with that." Jimmy Chung's house. Tony sat in his Honda Accord, parked 3 houses down, engine off. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. He'd been there for 2 hours. This is insane, he thought. This is actually insane, but he didn't leave. The diary entries played on loop in his head, Jimmy's words filtered through Cheryl's handwriting. Tony doesn't understand your fire. You need to access that desire. Some people are born to support and some are born to shine. Poison dripped into his marriage one rehearsal at a time. Mark's contact, the GM at the dealership, had agreed to meet him tomorrow. But Tony couldn't wait. He needed to see something, needed to know if the suspicions crawling through his brain were paranoia or prophecy. So here he was, sitting in the dark, watching. A light rain began to fall. Of course it did. Portland. His phone buzzed, a text from Sarah. "You okay? You left early today." He typed back, "Fine, just dealing with stuff." "Cheryl's stuff?" "Yeah." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "I'm here if you need to talk, don't do anything stupid." Too late for that, Tony thought. He was about to respond when headlights swept across his rearview mirror. A silver Mercedes, top of the line. Tony had seen it parked at the theater. Jimmy's car. He slid down in his seat, heart hammering, as the Mercedes rolled past him and turned into the driveway 3 houses up. The gate swung open automatically. The car disappeared behind the hedge. Tony waited, counting seconds. Counting breaths. Then he got out of his car. The rain was light but steady, soaking through his jacket as he walked up the sidewalk. He stayed close to the hedges, moving slowly, feeling ridiculous and terrified and completely unable to stop himself. There was a gap in the hedge near the front gate. Tony pressed himself against the wet leaves and looked through. The Mercedes was parked in the circular driveway. Both doors were open. Jimmy was walking around to the passenger side. He opened it, extended his hand. Cheryl stepped out. She was wearing a dress Tony had never seen before. Red, short. The kind of thing she would have said was too much for a Tuesday night. They stood there for a moment, facing each other. Jimmy said something Tony couldn't hear. Cheryl laughed, that bright, musical laugh that used to make Tony's chest warm. Then Jimmy cupped her face in both hands and kissed her. Not a quick kiss, not a European greeting. A real kiss, deep, hungry, the kind of kiss that meant something. Tony's legs stopped working. He watched as they broke apart, as Jimmy took Cheryl's hand. As they walked together toward the front door, the door opened. They went inside. A light came on upstairs, a bedroom light. Tony knew what bedroom lights meant. Then the light went off. Tony stood in the rain for what felt like hours, minutes, seconds. Time had stopped making sense. His stomach lurched. He made it to the gutter just in time, knees hitting wet concrete. Hands bracing against the curb, everything he'd eaten that day coming back up in violent waves. His body was rejecting the truth, literally rejecting it. When there was nothing left, he sat back on his heels, rain streaming down his face, mixing with something else. Tears, maybe, he couldn't tell anymore. His phone buzzed again, then again, and again, and again. He pulled it out with shaking hands. 4 missed calls from Richard Hayes. 3 emails marked urgent, a text message in all caps. "Tony, call me immediately. We have a critical issue with the cantilever support system. This is not a drill." The bridge, his bridge, Tony started laughing. It came out raw and broken, somewhere between a sob and a scream, 2 structures collapsing at once. His marriage and his masterpiece. The universe had a sick sense of humor. He sat there in the rain, phone buzzing, stomach empty, world ending. Then he stood up, wiped his mouth, wiped his eyes, got back in his car, drove home to an empty house. He didn't sleep that night. He sat at the kitchen table with his laptop, responding to Hayes's emails, running calculations, putting out fires. The bridge issue was real but manageable. A subcontractor had flagged a potential fatigue point in one of the retrofit connections. It needed review, not panic. Tony reviewed, analyzed, solved. At 4 a.m. he sent his report. Hayes responded almost immediately, "Good work, we'll discuss tomorrow." The house was silent, Cheryl's side of the bed untouched. Tony made coffee. Watched the sun come up through the kitchen window. Something had shifted inside him. The vomiting had purged more than dinner. It had purged the doubt, the denial, the desperate hope that maybe he was wrong about everything. He wasn't wrong. His wife was sleeping with another man. The question now was simple. What was he going to do about it? The answer, forming slowly in his engineer's mind, was anything but. Gary Blumenthal's office was a disaster zone. Scripts piled on scripts. Coffee cups forming small civilizations. A whiteboard covered in rehearsal schedules that looked like they'd been written by a caffeinated spider. Tony stood in the doorway, having talked his way past the front desk with a vague story about production support. "Mr. Reeves?" Gary looked up from his computer, startled. "Cheryl's husband, right? What brings you? Is everything okay? I need to talk to you about Jimmy Chung." Gary's face went through several expressions: surprise, concern, something that looked a lot like fear. "I'm not sure what you mean." "I think you are." Tony stepped inside and closed the door. "I think you know exactly what I mean." Gary's eyes darted to the closed door, then back to Tony. "Look, whatever's going on between you and your wife, that's personal stuff I can't get involved in." "How much did he donate?" "What?" "Jimmy, his donation to the theater. The one that bought him complete creative control. How much?" Gary's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "That's confidential board information. 50,000, 100. I really can't." "Was it worth it, Gary?" Tony's voice was quiet, controlled. Engineers didn't yell. They applied pressure at precisely the right points. "Was the money worth watching him turn your theater into his personal hunting ground?" Gary flinched like he'd been slapped. It's not like that." "Then tell me what it is like." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Rain pattered against the window. Somewhere in the building, someone was running scales on a piano. 75,000, Gary said finally. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Plus a promise of ongoing annual support. The theater was dying, Mr. Reeves. We were 3 months from closing our doors." "And in exchange?" He wanted involvement, creative input. The board agreed, most of them anyway. Most. Deborah Walsh voted against it. She's been on the board for 20 years, said it set a dangerous precedent. Gary laughed bitterly. "She was right." "What do you mean?" Gary rubbed his face with both hands. The script started changing, scenes added, roles adjusted, always with Jimmy at the center, always with young actresses in compromising positions. He looked at Tony with haunted eyes. "Your wife isn't the first, Mr. Reeves. She won't be the last." Tony felt the words land like hammer blows. "Why haven't you done anything?" "With what evidence? It's all consensual, adults making adult choices, and every time someone raises concerns, Jimmy waves his checkbook and the concerns disappear. That's pathetic." "Yes," Gary nodded slowly. "It is." Tony turned to leave, then stopped. "Deborah Walsh, how do I reach her?" "She owns the bookstore on Alberta Street, Powell's North." "She's there most afternoons." Gary paused. "She'll want to help. She's been waiting for someone to do something." "Then her wait is over." Cheryl still hadn't come home. Tony stood in their living room, his living room. He was starting to think of it now, cataloging the evidence. The diary, photographed, backed up to 3 separate cloud services, bank statements. Joint account withdrawals that didn't match any purchases he knew about. Phone records. Hours of calls to a number he'd traced to Jimmy's personal cell. He spread it all out on the coffee table like blueprints. Because that's what they were in a way, blueprints of a betrayal, a structure he could analyze, understand, eventually demolish. His phone rang. Sarah. "You sound like death," she said when he answered. "Thanks, you sound great too." "Tony, what's going on? You've been a ghost all week." He looked at the evidence spread before him, made a decision. "Can you come over? I need to show you something." She was there in 30 minutes. She took one look at the coffee table and said, "Oh, Tony." He walked her through everything. The diary entries. The stakeout, what he'd seen at Jimmy's house, the conversation with Gary. Sarah listened without interrupting. When he finished, she sat back on the couch and was quiet for a long time. "You have 2 problems, she said finally. "I know." "No, I don't think you do." She leaned forward, her engineer's mind visibly working. "Problem 1, your marriage is failing. That's painful, but it's personal. Problem 2, Jimmy Chung is a predator who uses his money and position to exploit vulnerable women. That's bigger than personal. They're connected." "They are, but you need to solve them in order." She tapped the diary photographs. "The marriage is already over, Tony. I'm sorry, but you know it's true. You can't unknow what you know. You can't unsee what you saw." Tony's throat tightened. Hearing it out loud made it real. "So what do I do?" "You protect yourself legally. You consult a lawyer. You get your ducks in a row." She met his eyes. "And then once you're protected, you figure out what to do about the predator." "And if I want to do both at once?" Sarah smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Then you need a plan, a good one." She picked up the diary photos. "Lucky for you, you're an engineer. We're good at plans." The lawyer's name was Ruth Abernathy, 63 years old, office in the Pearl District. Sarah had recommended her, handled my sister's divorce, absolutely ruthless, you'll love her. Tony didn't love her, but he respected her immediately. 7 years of marriage, Ruth said, flipping through the documents Tony had brought. No children, joint property, and evidence of infidelity. Yes, Oregon is a no-fault state. The infidelity won't affect asset division much, but it will affect your timeline and your leverage. I don't care about assets. Ruth looked up, eyebrows raised. Then what do you care about? Tony thought about the question. What did he care about? The house, the money, the life they'd built? No. None of that. I want her to know, he said slowly. I want her to understand exactly what she destroyed and when, meaning, I want the papers served at a specific time, a specific place. Ruth's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Interest, maybe, recognition. Tell me more. Tony told her about the showcase, the performance. The public moment of triumph Cheryl was expecting. You want to serve her at the theater, Ruth said, in front of everyone. After the performance, when she thinks she's about to meet Hollywood scouts. Ruth was quiet for a moment. That's cruel. Is it illegal? No. Then draft the papers. Ruth studied him for a long moment, then she nodded. I'll need a retainer and Mr. Reeves. Make sure this is what you want. Revenge has a way of hollowing people out. I'll take that risk. The bar was called The Alibi, ironic given the circumstances. It sat on a quiet block in southeast Portland, the kind of place where people went to drink seriously and not be bothered. Tony arrived at 7 p.m. The GM was already there. His name was Dennis Kowalski, mid-40s, thinning hair. The soft middle of a man who'd spent 20 years behind a desk. He was nursing a whiskey and looked like he hadn't slept in days. You're Tony. Not a question. I'm Tony. Sit down, I'll tell you what I know, then you're going to forget we ever met. Tony sat. Mark vouched for you, Dennis said. Said you were a good guy in a bad situation. I don't normally do this. Talk to strangers about my boss, but Jimmy's not my boss anymore. You quit. Got fired last week, 22 years at Chung Motors, and he canned me over a inventory discrepancy. Dennis laughed bitterly. The discrepancy was his. He'd been skimming from the service department for years. I found out. He found out I found out. I'm sorry. Don't be. It freed me up to talk to people like you. Dennis drained his whiskey and signaled for another. What do you want to know? Everything. Dennis nodded slowly. It started about 8 years ago. Jimmy's wife left him, took half his money and most of his pride. Something broke in him after that. He started collecting. Collecting what? Women, specific types. Dennis met Tony's eyes. Young. Vulnerable, usually in the arts, actresses, dancers, musicians, women who needed something he could provide, validation, opportunity, the illusion of a future. Tony's stomach turned. He made it a game, a bet really, started at the dealership. He'd pick a target, set a timeline, and challenge himself to close the deal. Close the deal. Sleep with them, then move on. Dennis shook his head. The other managers thought it was hilarious, boys being boys. I never laughed. And my wife, Dennis was quiet for a moment. I heard him talking about her maybe 2 months ago, right after she got cast. He was in his office with one of the sales managers, door open. I was walking by. What did he say? Dennis looked away. Tell me. He said the flat-chested actress would be his by Christmas, said she was already starving for attention, said her husband was a boring engineer who didn't understand her. Dennis's voice dropped. He called it easy money. Easy money, easy money. Tony felt something shift inside him, something cold settling into place. There's more, Dennis said. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. He keeps an album, private, on a phone he thinks nobody knows about, but I managed his IT stuff for years. I saw things. He turned the phone toward Tony. Pictures, dozens of them, women in various states of undress, some posed, some candid, some clearly taken without the subject's knowledge. Scroll, Dennis said. Tony scrolled. Woman after woman, face after face, trophy after trophy. And then Cheryl, a photo of her at what looked like a rehearsal dinner, laughing at something off camera, unaware she was being captured. Below the photo, a caption, Target 17, the French girl in progress. Target, number 17, in progress. When was this taken? Tony's voice didn't sound like his own. 2 weeks ago, according to the metadata. Tony stared at the screen, his wife, reduced to a number, a conquest, a betting slip in some rich man's game. Why does he do this? Tony asked. He's got money, he could have any woman he wanted. Because it's not about the women. Dennis pocketed the phone. It's about power. Every time his business takes a hit, and it's been taking a lot of hits lately, the market's rough, he does this. Finds someone to dominate, makes him feel in control again. That's pathetic. Yeah, it is. Dennis stood, dropping cash on the bar for both their drinks. I've told you what I know. What you do with it is your business. Dennis, the man paused. Thank you. Dennis shook his head. Don't thank me. I should have said something years ago. Maybe I could have stopped. He broke off. Just do what you need to do and make it count. He walked out. Tony sat alone in the bar for a long time, target 17, in progress. The grief was gone now, burned away completely. What remained was something harder, colder, something that felt like steel. He pulled out his phone. Called Ruth Abernathy. Mr. Reeves, it's late. I need the papers ready for the showcase, no delays. They'll be ready. And Ruth, I want to add something, a cover letter, personal. What kind of cover letter? Tony thought about Simon and Garfunkel, about the sounds of silence, about a song lyric that had been running through his head for weeks. I'll email it to you tonight. He hung up. Opened his notes app, started writing. The engineer was designing his revenge, the day before the showcase. Tony stood in the middle of what used to be his living room, surrounded by cardboard boxes, Cheryl's things. He'd been packing them for 3 hours, her books, her vintage Polaroid camera, the one he'd bought for their anniversary, the anniversary they never celebrated. Her collection of playbills from shows she'd seen. Her clothes from the closet folded neatly, arranged by color because that's how she liked them. 7 years of shared life sorted into containers. It was meditative in a way. Each item a memory, each memory examined, acknowledged, released. The wedding photo in the silver frame. Their honeymoon in Big Sur. The night she'd cried in his arms after her father's funeral. The morning she'd brought him breakfast in bed for no reason except that she loved him. She had loved him. Once, he believed that, but love, like bridges, could only bear so much weight before it buckled. He sealed the last box as his phone buzzed, a text from Mark. It's done. Backstage just went nuclear. Call me, Tony called. What happened? Mark's voice was tight with controlled fury. I confronted him in front of half the cast. Jesus, Mark, I thought we agreed to wait. I couldn't. He was running lines with your wife and his hands were, look, it doesn't matter. I lost my temper. What did you say? I told him I knew about the bet, about the album, about all of it. Mark laughed darkly. He tried to deny it, called me a jealous has-been, so I told him I had a source, a former employee who was ready to talk. Dennis. I didn't use his name, but Jimmy got the message. Mark paused. Here's the thing, Tony. Half the cast walked out. Alina's already on the phone spreading the word. The showcase tomorrow is going to be a skeleton crew. Will it still happen? Jimmy's too arrogant to cancel. He's already spinning it, artistic differences, protecting the vision, that kind of garbage. But the energy's poisoned. Everyone knows something's wrong. And Cheryl, silence on the line. She stayed, Mark said finally. Jimmy told her the accusations were lies from jealous people trying to sabotage her big break. She believed him. Or she wanted to believe him. Tony closed his eyes. She called you a vindictive husband trying to destroy her dreams, Mark continued. Said she was done letting your insecurity hold her back. The words should have hurt. Maybe a week ago they would have. Now they just felt like data points, evidence of a structure already collapsed. Thanks for telling me, Mark. What are you going to do? What I plan to do, the papers are ready, the process server's booked. And after, Tony looked around at the boxes, the empty shelves, the ghost of a life. After I start building something new. That evening, Tony visited Deborah Walsh at her bookstore. Powell's North was a converted Victorian house on Alberta Street, stuffed floor to ceiling with used books. It smelled like old paper and possibility. Deborah herself was 72, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, and not remotely impressed by Tony's story. I've been trying to get that man out of our theater for 3 years, she said, pouring tea from a chipped ceramic pot. Every board meeting I raise concerns. Every meeting I get outvoted. Money talks, Mr. Reeves. What if we could make it scream? Deborah raised an eyebrow. Tony laid out his plan, the stills from the bath scene taken by a sympathetic crew member who'd agreed to document the performance. The framing, the whisper campaign. It's not about destroying him, Tony said. It's about exposure, letting people see what he really is. And your wife, she made her choice. Deborah studied him for a long moment. You understand this could blow back on you. People will call you bitter, vindictive. Let them. Some will say you're no better than him. I know the difference between me and Jimmy Chung. Tony met her eyes. I loved my wife, he just wanted to own her. Deborah was quiet, then slowly she nodded. I'll help, but we do this carefully, strategically, no scorched earth. Agreed. She extended her hand. Tony shook it. That night, Tony found the diary one last time. He'd avoided reading the final entries. Some part of him hadn't wanted to know how the story ended, even though he already knew. But now, in the empty house, surrounded by boxes and silence, he needed to see it through. He opened to the last written page. October 15th. Tomorrow is the showcase. Tomorrow, everything changes. Jimmy says I'm ready, more than ready. He says I have a light inside me that Hollywood will see, that the world will see. Tony doesn't understand. He never has. He builds bridges, structures that go from one fixed point to another. He doesn't understand that some of us need to burn our bridges to become who we're meant to be. Jimmy is my bridge now. My bridge to a new life. I have to burn the old one. I'm sorry, Tony, but some fires are necessary. Tony read it twice, 3 times. Bridge, she'd used that word, his life's work, and she'd turned it into a metaphor for destruction. He closed the diary, walked to the stereo, put on the record that had been sitting there for weeks. Simon and Garfunkel. The sounds of silence. The opening notes filled the empty room. Hello, darkness, my old friend. Tony sat on the floor, back against the wall, and let the music wash over him. Tomorrow, the showcase would happen. Tomorrow, his wife would take her bow, scanning the crowd for scouts who didn't exist. Tomorrow, she would see the process server approaching and mistake her for opportunity. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, there was just the silence, the darkness, the strange piece of a man who had stopped fighting the inevitable and started planning for what came after. The song played on, and the people bowed and prayed to the neon god they made. Tony closed his eyes. The stage was set. The Riverside Community Theater had never looked better or worse. Depending on who you asked, Tony sat in his car across the street watching the crowd filter in. It was 7:15 p.m. on a Saturday, showcase night, the night Cheryl had been dreaming about for months, the night everything would end. He wasn't going inside, couldn't. But he had eyes and ears in there. Marcus, a lighting tech he'd known since college, had agreed to film the performance and report back in real time. The footage would be useful later. For the plan, his phone buzzed, text from Marcus. House is maybe 40% full. Tension you could cut with a knife. Jimmy's doing his charm offensive, but people are avoiding eye contact. Tony typed back, keep me posted. Another buzz. Sarah, you sure about this? Yes. Once it's done, it's done. I know. He put the phone down and watched the last stragglers enter the theater. Somewhere in there, his wife was preparing to perform, preparing to bare herself, literally and figuratively, in front of strangers, for a man who saw her as a trophy, a number, a bet, target 17. The process server was already in position. A woman named Diane, mid-50s, looked like someone's aunt. Ruth had recommended her specifically. She blends in, Ruth had said. People don't see her coming until it's too late. Tony had given Diane very specific instructions. Wait until the final bow. Wait until Cheryl was scanning the crowd for the scouts she believed were coming. Then approach. Smile, let her think for just a moment that her dream was coming true. Then hand her the papers. Cruel? Maybe. But Tony was past caring about cruel. He'd spent weeks watching his marriage dissolve, watching his wife choose a predator over him, watching her write in her diary about burning bridges. Now she'd learn what it felt like to be burned. Inside the theater, Marcus was doing his job. He'd positioned himself in the tech booth, camera running, documenting everything. The performance was rough. That was the kindest word for it. Half the cast had walked out after Mark's confrontation. The ones who remained were going through the motions, their performances stiff and uncomfortable. The chemistry was off. The timing was wrong. Every scene felt like it was happening underwater. And then came the bath scene. Marcus had read about it in the program notes. A newly conceived sequence exploring the intimacy and power dynamics at the heart of the narrative. Jimmy's words, Jimmy's addition. The lights dimmed. A bathtub was wheeled to center stage, an antique copper thing that looked expensive and out of place. Steam rose from the water. Supposedly hot, though Marcus knew it was just a fog machine hidden underneath. Cheryl entered in a silk robe, her character. The French girl, 18 years old in this version, though the actress playing her could pass for younger. That was the point, wasn't it? That had always been the point. She dropped the robe. Marcus looked away. He wasn't a prude, but something about this felt wrong. Exploitative, like watching a car crash in slow motion. Jimmy entered. The Chinese man, wealthy, powerful, in control, he approached the tub, knelt beside it, picked up a washcloth. "Let me take care of you," he said, his line, his scene, his fantasy made flesh. He began to wash her, shoulders first, arms, back. And then Marcus would tell Tony later that he didn't understand what happened at first. None of the audience did. The washcloth moved across her chest, rough fabric against sensitive skin, and Cheryl's whole body seized, not acting. This wasn't acting, her back arched. Her hands gripped the sides of the tub. A sound escaped her, something between a gasp and a moan, and her face contorted into an expression of overwhelming sensation. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed. Because here's the thing they couldn't know Cheryl's condition. The hypersensitivity she'd confided to Tony 7 years ago in a tiny apartment surrounded by Thai takeout containers. The rough washcloth. The water, the public performance of something that should have been private. Her body betrayed her in front of everyone. She shuddered, trembled, made sounds that no actress would choose to make. The whole thing lasted maybe 15 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. The audience interpreted it as melodrama, overacting. Someone in the back actually laughed, a nervous, uncomfortable sound. Others whispered. A few looked away in second-hand embarrassment. Jimmy, to his credit or his shame, kept going, finished the scene, helped her out of the tub, wrapped her in a towel. Cheryl's face was flushed. Her hands were shaking. She looked shell-shocked. But she was a professional. She finished the play. The curtain call was excruciating. Marcus filmed it all. The half-hearted applause. The scattered standing ovation from Jimmy's business associates in the front row. The way Cheryl kept scanning the crowd, searching for faces she didn't recognize. Agents. Scouts. The Hollywood representatives Jimmy had promised. She found Diane instead. The process server was making her way down the center aisle, a warm smile on her face, a manila envelope in her hand. She looked like exactly what Cheryl was hoping to see, an industry professional approaching to offer congratulations. Cheryl's face lit up. Marcus zoomed in. He'd been told to capture this moment specifically. Diane reached the edge of the stage, extended her hand. "Cheryl Reeves? Yes, that's me. These are for you." She handed over the envelope. Cheryl took it, still smiling, probably thinking it was some kind of contract, an offer. The beginning of everything she'd ever wanted. Then she opened it. Marcus watched her face change. Confusion first, then recognition. Then something that looked like her entire world collapsing inward. The divorce papers were on top, standard legal language. But clipped to the front was a single sheet of paper. Handwritten, Tony's handwriting, the lyric sheet. Tony had spent hours crafting it. The words from The Sound of Silence arranged like poetry, like a eulogy. "Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again. People talking without speaking. People hearing without listening." And the people bowed and prayed to the neon god they made. The words of the prophets are written on the subway walls and tenement halls and whispered in the sounds of silence. This is that silence, Cheryl. This is what you chose. Cheryl read it twice. Her lips moved, forming the words silently. She looked up, scanned the crowd again, but this time she wasn't looking for scouts. She was looking for Jimmy. He was already gone, slipped out the side door the moment the curtain fell. Networking with his business friends, moving on to the next thing, the next target. The play was over. For him, it had never been more than that. Cheryl stood on that stage, divorce papers in her trembling hands, and realized, perhaps for the first time, exactly how alone she was. Marcus stopped filming. He'd seen enough. 3 days after the showcase, Cheryl came home. Tony was in the kitchen when he heard the key in the lock. He'd changed the locks the day after the performance. She must have tried her old key first. Now she was using the spare from under the garden gnome, the one they'd hidden there when they first moved in, back when they were still a team. The door opened. Tony! He didn't turn around, just kept washing the dish in his hands, a coffee mug, his not hers. "Tony, please, we need to talk." "Do we?" She stepped into the kitchen. He could see her reflection in the window above the sink. She looked terrible, pale, exhausted, makeup smeared like she'd been crying for days. Good, some part of him thought. Then he felt ashamed of the thought. Then he didn't. "I know you're angry," she said. "I know I hurt you, but if you would just let me explain." "Explain what?" "What happened with Jimmy, with everything." Tony turned off the water, set the mug on the drying rack, finally turned to face her. "Go ahead, explain." She took a breath, prepared her performance. It was the character, Tony. The French girl, she's passionate, reckless. She makes choices that a rational person wouldn't make. I was so deep in her head that I lost myself. I lost US. She was crying now, real tears, maybe he couldn't tell anymore. Jimmy saw my potential when no one else did. He pushed me to be better, to go deeper. And somewhere along the way, the lines got blurred between the character and me. Between the performance and reality. The lines got blurred. Yes, exactly, I wasn't myself, I was her, and she's drawn to powerful men who take what they want. It's in the script, it's who she is. Tony leaned against the counter, crossed his arms. That's a good speech. It's not a speech, it's the truth. It's a good speech, he repeated. Well-rehearsed, good emotional beats. The tears are a nice touch. Her face crumpled. Tony, but here's the thing, Cheryl, I've seen the diary. Silence. I've read every entry, every word you wrote about Jimmy and his vision, about me not understanding your fire, about needing to burn the old bridge. That was just, and I've seen the photos. She went still. The album, the one Jimmy keeps on his private phone. His collection. What photos? I don't know what your... Target number 17. Tony's voice was flat, cold. That's what he called you, target number 17, the flat-chested actress. Cheryl's face drained of color. He made a bet, Cheryl, before you even got the part. He bet his managers that he could seduce you within a year. You weren't cast for your talent. You were cast because you fit a type. Young-looking, vulnerable, desperate for validation. No, that's not. You were a conquest, a trophy, and now that the play's over, you're nothing. She was shaking now, full-body tremors. Jimmy loves me, he said. Jimmy said a lot of things to a lot of women. You're number 17. There were 16 before you. There'll be more after. You're lying. You're just saying this because you're angry. Call him. What? Call him right now. Tell him you need him. See what he says. Cheryl stared at Tony. Then with trembling hands, she pulled out her phone, dialed. Tony watched her face as it rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Voicemail. She hung up, dialed again. Voicemail. He's probably just busy. He's not busy, Cheryl. He's done. The play's over. His interest in you ended the moment the curtain fell. She called a 3rd time. This time someone answered. Tony could hear Jimmy's voice tinny through the speaker. Cheryl, stop calling. Jimmy, please, I need to see you. Everything is falling apart and I just need... The production is over. Our professional relationship is concluded. Professional. Jimmy, what we had wasn't professional. What we had was a performance, and all performances end. A pause. Goodbye, Cheryl. The line went dead. Cheryl stared at the phone in her hand. Something was breaking behind her eyes. Tony could see it happening in real time. He doesn't mean. He means every word, just like he meant every word he said to target number 16 and 15. And all the others. Cheryl sank into a kitchen chair. The tears were real now, completely real, the kind that came from somewhere deeper than performance. I gave up everything, she whispered. For him, for this. No. Tony moved toward the door. You gave up everything for a part, a role in a show that was never going to lead anywhere. You traded 7 years of marriage for a fantasy that existed only in your head. He picked up his keys from the counter. The P in that fantasy, it didn't stand for potential, Cheryl. It didn't stand for passion or promise or any of the things you told yourself. He opened the door. It stood for part. You were just playing a part, and now the part is over. He walked out. Behind him, he heard the sound of his wife, his ex-wife, sobbing in the kitchen of the house that used to be theirs. He didn't look back. The Whisper campaign began 2 days later. Deborah Walsh was the architect. Sarah was the strategist. Tony provided the raw materials, select stills from the bath scene, carefully framed to suggest intimacy without explicit content. The images showed Jimmy, wet washcloth in hand, leaning over an actress who looked impossibly young. The angles were chosen specifically. The lighting emphasized his age, her youth. No caption needed. The pictures told their own story. Elena Vasquez, Mark's wife, bitter about her fading career, received the images from an anonymous concerned citizen. Within 48 hours, they'd spread to every corner of Portland's arts community. Did you hear about Jimmy Chung? The car dealer, the one who funds the Playhouse? There are pictures with that young actress. How young? Young enough to be his daughter. Younger, maybe. The rumor mutated as it traveled. That was the beauty of Whispers. They grew in the telling. By the end of the week, Jimmy wasn't just a wealthy patron with questionable taste. He was something worse. Something that made parents pull their children closer when they saw his advertisements. Something that made families choose different dealerships. Something that made even his oldest friends stop returning his calls. The truth was more complicated, of course. The truth always is. Cheryl was 31 years old, not a child. The The relationship was inappropriate but not illegal. But the court of public opinion didn't deal in technicalities, it dealt in optics, and Jimmy Chung's optics were destroyed. 3 months later, Tony drove past Chung Motors on his way to work. The lot was empty, not just slow, empty. 3 dozen cars sat baking in the summer sun, their windshields plastered with desperate price reductions. 40% off, must sell, everything goes, a banner hung across the showroom. Under new management soon. Tony didn't slow down, didn't gloat, just noted it and kept driving. The collapse had been spectacular. First, the customers stopped coming. Then the employees started quitting. Nobody wanted Chung Motors on their resume anymore. Then the bank called in its loans. Jimmy had tried to fight back. That was the tragic part. He'd actually tried. First came the newspaper ad, full page in the Oregonian. "I am not what they say I am," in giant letters, followed by a rambling defense that mentioned his charitable donations, his community involvement, his deep respect for women of all ages. The internet had a field day. Screenshots went viral. Memes were born. Someone created a parody account that gained 50,000 followers in a week. Then came the carnival, Jimmy's last desperate gambit. A family fun day at the dealership, complete with bounce houses, face painting, and a petting zoo. An attempt to rebrand himself as a family-friendly businessman. The protesters showed up within an hour. Mark Vasquez was there, holding a sign that read, "Supporting Predators, Family-Friendly." Deborah Walsh stood beside him with "Ask HIM about the album." A dozen others joined them, theater people, community members, strangers who'd heard the stories. The local news covered it. The families left. The bounce house sat empty, its motor humming uselessly in the afternoon heat. Jimmy declared bankruptcy 2 weeks later. The playhouse got a new donor. The board got a new conscience. And Jimmy Chung became a cautionary tale whispered in theater greenrooms across the Pacific Northwest. Meanwhile, Tony fixed his bridge. The Granville retrofit had nearly derailed during his personal crisis. Those urgent emails, those panicked calls about the cantilever support system. But with his marriage behind him, legally finalized, emotionally processed, Tony threw himself into the work. The solution came to him on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks after the divorce was final. An elegant modification to the load-bearing calculations. A way to strengthen the weakest point without replacing the entire structure. He presented it to Hayes on a Thursday. "This is brilliant," Hayes said, flipping through Tony's report. "This saves us 3 months and $2 million. It also makes the bridge safer, by a factor of 12%. Hayes looked up. 12%? "Yes, sir. Tony, this might be the best engineering work I've seen in 20 years. It made the trade publications. Then the regional news, then a feature in Engineering Today, complete with a photo of Tony standing in front of the completed bridge. "Building bridges that last," the headline read. Tony framed it, hung it in his office. The job offer came in September. A firm in Boston, major infrastructure projects, twice his current salary, a chance to start completely fresh. Sarah found out before he did she'd been the one to recommend him. "You told them about me?" Tony asked, genuinely surprised. "Of course I did. You're the best structural engineer I know, and you need to get out of Portland." "I don't need to." "Yes, you do." She sat on the edge of his desk. "Every corner of this city reminds you of her, every restaurant, every street. You can't build a new life in the ruins of the old one. That's very poetic for an engineer. I contain multitudes." He accepted the offer a week later. The goodbye party was small. Just Sarah and a few colleagues at a bar downtown. No theater people, no drama, just drinks and stories and the particular bittersweetness of endings. At the end of the night, Sarah handed him a wrapped package. "For you, for the new apartment." Tony opened it. A vinyl record, Simon and Garfunkel, Bookends, the album that contained The Sound of Silence. "Really?" He laughed. "You're giving me this? Turn it over." He did. On the back, Sarah had written in silver marker, "For Tony, the silence ends here, new songs await." And below that, her phone number. "In case you ever want company," she said. "For the new songs, I mean." Tony looked at her, really looked. At the sharp jawline and the kind eyes and the 6 years of friendship that had somehow become something more without either of them noticing. "Sarah, don't say anything, not now, just take the record, take the job, figure out who you are when you're not half of a broken hole." She kissed him on the cheek. "And then maybe call me." She walked away before he could respond. Tony stood in the bar, holding the record, feeling something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. The plane left Portland at 6:47 a.m. on a gray October morning. Tony had a window seat. He watched the city shrink below him, the bridges spanning the Willamette, the green hills, the streets where he'd built a life, and watched it crumble. In his carry-on bag, buried beneath his laptop and a paperback novel, was Cheryl's rehearsal diary. He'd kept it this whole time, a document of destruction, evidence of betrayal. He wasn't sure why, habit maybe, or some masochistic need to remember, but somewhere over Idaho he pulled it out. Read the first entry one more time. Jimmy told me today that Tony doesn't understand my fire. Read the last entry. Jimmy is my bridge now, I have to burn the old one. Then he stood up, walked to the back of the plane, found the trash compartment where flight attendants disposed of garbage, and he threw the diary away. It landed among coffee cups and crumpled napkins and all the other detritus of travel, just another piece of garbage heading nowhere. Tony walked back to his seat. Put in his earbuds, pulled up Sarah's record on his phone. He digitized it before packing the vinyl. The sound of silence started playing, but this time it didn't sound sad. It sounded like an ending and like a beginning. He closed his eyes and let the plane carry him toward whatever came next. 2 years later, Tony's apartment in Boston was small but well-designed. Clean lines. Natural light, a view of the harbor from the bedroom window. He'd chosen it specifically for the light. Engineers spent too much time in gray offices, and he'd wanted a home that felt open. It was a Saturday morning in March. He was making coffee, enjoying the particular silence of a weekend with no obligations, when his phone buzzed. Email notification. Subject line, thought you should see. The sender was Corinne Whitfield. She'd been in the chorus of The Lover. They'd exchanged maybe 20 words total back when he still attended Cheryl's events. He hadn't heard from her since leaving Portland. He opened the email. Tony, I debated whether to send this. Decided you had a right to know. Link below. Hope you're doing well. K below that, a URL. A video hosting site he didn't recognize, something with an X in the domain name. Tony stared at it for a long moment, then he clicked. The video was low quality, grainy, clearly amateur production. The lighting was harsh and unflattering. The set design, such as it was, consisted of a bed and some curtains that were supposed to look expensive but didn't. The woman had blue hair. Electric blue like a comic book character, glitter on her cheekbones, heavy makeup that didn't quite hide the exhaustion underneath, and breasts, C-cup maybe larger, the kind of augmentation that looked impressive in photographs but unnatural in motion. Tony almost closed the window, almost decided he didn't need to see this, didn't want to know, but something made him look closer. The posture. The way she held her shoulders, slightly hunched like she was protecting something. The ears, small and close to the head, distinctive, the curve of her back, the specific architecture of her spine. He knew that body, had known it for 7 years, would recognize it anywhere, regardless of what had been added or subtracted. Cheryl. She was performing, that was the only word for it. Going through the motions of passion without any of the feeling. Her expressions during the act were grimaces, not pleasure. Her movements were mechanical, rehearsed, and her eyes were dead, empty, hollow. The eyes of someone who had arrived at a destination and discovered it was nothing like the brochures promised. Tony watched for 30 seconds, maybe a minute. Long enough to understand. The surgery had stolen her sensitivity. The hypersensitivity that had once made her gasp at the lightest touch, that had been both her burden and her gift, gone, replaced by silicone and scar tissue and nerve damage. She'd gotten the breasts she thought she needed, and lost the only thing that had made her special. She'd achieved a form of stardom, a kind of fame. Her name, a stage name now, probably in lights somewhere, but the light in her was extinguished. Tony closed the video. He sat in his kitchen for a long time, coffee growing cold, processing what he'd seen. His phone buzzed again. A different notification this time, email from the American Society of Civil Engineers. Subject line, congratulations on your award. He opened it. Dear Mr. Reeves, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as this year's recipient of the Excellence in Infrastructure Innovation Award for your work on the Granville Bridge retrofit project. Your elegant solution to the Cantilever Support Challenge has been recognized as a landmark achievement in structural engineering. The award ceremony will be held in New York on April 15th. Please confirm your attendance at your earliest convenience. Sincerely, the ASCE Awards Committee. Tony read it twice. Looked at the window where the video had been playing. Looked at the email. 2 screens, 2 lives, 2 paths that had diverged 7 years ago on a college quad when a girl on a bicycle crashed into a boy with a briefcase full of thesis notes. She had burned her bridge. Watched it collapse, and found herself stranded on an island made of broken promises and shattered dreams. He had built his bridge, strengthened it, used it to carry himself somewhere new. Building bridges that last. That was what the headline had said, what his career had become, what his life now represented. And Cheryl had achieved exactly what she'd wanted. Fame, visibility. A kind of stardom in a specific corner of the internet. But stardom, it turned out, came in many forms. Not all of them were what you imagined when you were young and hungry and willing to burn everything for a chance at the spotlight. Tony stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the harbor. His phone rang. Sarah, they talked twice a week now. Met in person once a month, taking turns traveling. Something was building between them, slowly, carefully, the way strong structures were supposed to be built. He let it go to voicemail. He'd call her back in an hour. For now, he just wanted to stand in the silence. His silence. The silence he'd earned and constructed and furnished with everything he'd learned about loss and recovery and the long, patient work of becoming whole again. He thought about Cheryl one last time. The girl on the bicycle. The woman in the diary, the stranger in the video. He thought about what she'd sacrificed, what she'd gained, what she'd lost forever. And then, because he was human, and because some small part of him would always remember the way she'd looked in that tiny apartment, surrounded by Thai takeout containers, confessing her deepest secret to a boy she barely knew, he smiled. A complicated smile, sad and satisfied and something else he couldn't quite name. But I have to say, he murmured to no one, she did look great with tits. He turned away from the window, made fresh coffee, called Sarah back. The silence was complete, and it was his own.